Seosamh, Seosamh, O Fada, Maolallai Fada. So once upon a time, long ago, when Kerry was a kingdom, there lived in the town of Dingle a tailor. And that man was a very hard worker, and he worked hard and sewed and cut and made clothes for the town, for the people of the town. And yet, no matter how hard he worked, he never seemed to make a lot of profit. He only ever had enough profit to buy the material for the next day's job. But he worked hard and he was happy but poor. Until the day came that the King of Kerry came to visit Dingle. And as he was walking down the street, he saw a suit of clothes in the tailor's shop window. And he was very impressed by it. And he told his courtiers to go to the tailor and to order one suit of clothes for every day of the week for the king. And so the king's people came into the tailor and said, "Mr. Tailor, this is a very important day for you. This is your lucky day because the king is very impressed with the suit of clothes he saw in your window. And he's asking you to make a suit of clothes for each day of the week for him. And he'll pay you in gold." And so they gave him the king's measurements and they gave him the money to buy the cloth and the material. And he went and bought different material for each day. And he snipped and he sewed and he measured with his tape. And he made 7 beautiful suits of clothes for the king. And the king's people came and brought them to the king. And the king was delighted with the clothes he'd got. And he paid the tailor handsomely with a big bag of gold. And the tailor brought the gold home and he said to his wife, "At last, darling," he said, "we have some money. We have some extra money. And I have some money that I can spend on myself." And she said, "You spend it on yourself." He said, "But what will I spend it on?" And he thought and he thought and he said, "All those times I was so poor. And what was it that I always wanted?" Then he said to himself, "You know, I know what I always wanted. I wanted an overcoat." And so he went to the market, to the cloth market, and he bought himself a beautiful stretch of the best Donegal tweed, the most expensive material and the best material that was on sale. And he brought it home, he got out his measuring tape and he measured himself around the waist and around the chest, down his arms, and he got out his scissors and he cut and he stitched and he tacked and he sewed and he tried it on and he adjusted it until he made himself a beautiful overcoat. And he was so proud of that overcoat that wherever he went, he wore it. He wore it in the morning when he went down to the shop to buy the newspaper. He wore it during the day when he walked around the town. On Sunday when he went to mass, he wore it. When he went to the library to borrow books, he wore it. Everywhere he went, he wore it. And everywhere he went, the people of Dingle were so impressed with his overcoat. They said, "Mr. Tailor, what a fine overcoat. A beautiful overcoat. As fine an overcoat as we ever have seen. The finest overcoat that ever was seen in Dingle town." And he was so proud of that overcoat he even wore it to bed. And the fact is that he wore it and he wore it and he wore it and wore it and he wore it and wore it and wore it until one day he looked at himself in the mirror and he realised that his fine overcoat was all worn out. And he took off the overcoat and he said, "My beautiful overcoat, I've worn it so much that it's all worn out. I'm going to have to throw it away." And he took off the overcoat. He was just about to throw the overcoat into the big box he had in the corner for old, worn out material, when he saw that in the back of the overcoat there was a big square of material, big square of cloth that was as good as the day he bought it first. And so he said, "I'm not going to waste that beautiful piece of cloth." And he got his scissors and he clipped out the square of cloth in the back and he threw the worn out bit away. And he said to himself, "I have a beautiful piece now of Donegal tweed. What can I make for myself with it?" And he said, "I know what I can make. I can make a waistcoat." And so he measured himself again and he stitched and he sewed and he made himself a beautiful waistcoat out of that piece of material. And he was so proud of that waistcoat that he wore it wherever he went. He wore it in the morning when he went down to the shops. He wore it on Sunday to mass, to the library for his books, to the shops for shopping. And wherever he went, the people of Dingle admired and praised his waistcoat. They said, "Mr. Tailor, what a fine waistcoat. As fine a waistcoat as we ever did see. The finest waistcoat that ever was seen in the town of Dingle." He was so proud of that waistcoat that he wore it even to bed at night. He wore it and he wore it and he wore it and wore it. He wore it and wore it and wore it and wore it until one day he looked at himself in the mirror and he saw that his beautiful waistcoat was all worn out. And so he took it off and he said, my beautiful waistcoat that everybody loves so much, I'm going to have to throw it away. And as he was about to throw it into the box in the corner for the old material, he saw that in the back of his waistcoat was a square that wasn't worn, that hadn't been touched by all the wearing. And he said, I'm not going to waste that beautiful piece of material. And so he cut it out, and he threw away the worn out bit, and he kept that piece that was as good as the day he bought it. And he looked at that piece of material and he said, what can I make with this piece of material? What would be nice to make with this? And he said, I know what I can make. I can make a pocket for my shirt. And so he stitched and he sewed and he snipped until he had stitched on a beautiful pocket onto his shirt. And wherever he went, he wore that shirt, and wherever he went, people admired that pocket. They admired it in the shop when he went for his groceries, in the library when he went for his books, on Sunday when he went to church. Wherever he went, people said, Mr. Taylor, what a fine pocket. As fine a pocket on a shirt as we ever did see, the finest shirt pocket that has ever been seen in Dingletown. And he was so proud of that shirt and that shirt pocket that he wore it even in bed, until the day came when he looked at it and he said, my pocket is all worn out, I'm going to have to throw it away. And so he snipped the pocket off his shirt and he was about to throw that piece of material into the wastebasket in the corner, when he saw that in the middle of that pocket there was a square of material just this size. He said, what am I going to do? He said, that material is as good as the day I bought it. I'm not going to waste it. And so he cut it out and he kept himself that little square and threw away the raggy bit. And he said, a square of material this size, what can I make with it? He said, I know what I can make. I can make a little button for the top of my shirt. And that's what he did. He stitched and he sewed until he made a beautiful button for the top of his shirt. And so proud was he of that button that he wore it wherever he went, and wherever he went it was admired by the people. Mr. Taylor, they said, what a fine button. As fine a button as we ever did see. In the shop, in the library, the church, in the schools, everywhere in Dingletown, people admired that button. They said the finest button that ever was seen in the town of Dingle. And so he opened that shirt and he closed that shirt and he wore that shirt to bed until one day he looked at himself in the mirror and he looked at his button and he said, my poor button is all rags. It's all gibbles. I'm going to have to throw it out. And so he cut it off and he pulled it out into the little piece of material, and it was pure rags, and he was about to throw it away into the corner when, with his tailor's eye that was so used to examining material, he saw that in the middle of that piece of material was just one thread, one single thread, and he knew that thread was as good as the day he bought it, and he said, I'm not going to waste that thread. So he got his needle and he teased out the thread and he pulled it out until he had that beautiful piece of thread, and he threw away the worn out bit and he looked at this piece of thread and he said, I've one piece of thread left from that fantastic roll of material I bought the first day to make myself the overcoat. He said, what will I make with this piece of thread? And he said, I know what I can make with it. He said, I can spin a yarn. I can make a story. And the story that he made is the story that I just told you. Agus sin é scéal an táil leor. That's the story of the Taylor Dingle.